Right now, on to the point. The state budget deficit.
The fiscal outlook is, as we say in our report, somewhat alarming.
Tonight, the warning from state analysts and the growing gap with the governor's numbers. A high-stakes battle over power.
If California can't stand up to Trump, then who can?
The states do not have the authority to regulate federal agents, period.
State lawmakers move to further challenge federal immigration enforcement and the power of federal authority. A well-known actor and director turns himself in. The charges Timothy Busfield is facing and his connection to Sacramento. And a second passport, just in case. Why dual citizenship is booming among Americans and what's driving the trend. The state's financial situation is alarming. That's what California's nonpartisan legislative analyst office has to say about Governor Gavin Newsom's proposed state budget. Thank you for joining us. I'm Alex Bell, and this is not the first report like this. I do want to bring in ABC 10's Jeannie Nguyen, who is here to explain what is at stake.
Alex, during the governor's budget proposal last week, it included a $2.9 billion shortfall. That is much less than what the LAO predicted. But the governor's office is standing firm on its optimistic proposal, even though Republican lawmakers are sounding the alarm to cut back on spending.
The governor is estimating that the state was facing a roughly $3 billion deficit. This is considerably smaller than the deficit that we estimated for the state back in November.
That estimate back in November was close to an $18 billion deficit the state would be facing.
The governor is estimating $42 billion higher revenues than was assumed in the Budget Act from June of 2025. Our office estimates that revenues are up, but only by about $11 billion.
Gabe Pettick with the nonpartisan legislative analyst's office says the governor's budget acknowledged potential risks to the stock market that could impact the budget, but did not take that into consideration when making this proposal. But the LEO did factor the risks, especially with innovations around AI.
We acknowledge there's probably a lot of long-term value in some of these innovations. But just like at the time that the internet was emerging in the late 1990s, the market can get ahead of things, and we see that happening right now.
Pettick acknowledges the state has very strong revenues, but also a lot of financial responsibilities, especially around education. But he warns the state needs to change its spending sooner than later.
The fiscal outlook is, as we say in our report, somewhat alarming. The state's fiscal situation is somewhat chronic at this point. This would be the fourth year in a row now that the state has faced deficits. The cumulative amount of deficit that the legislature has had to address in the last 4 years would sum to $125 billion.
Republican Senator Tony Strickland says the state has a spending problem.
Governor Newsom's like Peter Pan. He wants to govern by pixie dust, and he's in fantasy land.
Adding that the state needs to start budgeting on certain programs.
Healthcare for illegals coming here at $13 billion. That's a huge number. We need to get rid of that. We also need to do more oversight. I wish we had a more active state controller.
A spokesperson for the Department of Finance tells ABC 10 that it respectfully disagrees with the LAO's predictions, adding that the governor's budget is built on modest below average revenue growth, and it includes $23 billion in combined reserves to protect against volatility.
Now, budget talks are currently happening at the Capitol as the governor prepares for a revision to the proposal in May. The LAO warns Californians that if spending continues, the long-term impacts could include cuts that could impact state services. Alex.
You're right, Jeannie. Thank you for that. A proposed ballot initiative limiting Proposition 50 is now cleared for circulation, which means it's authorized to begin collecting signatures. So the initiative would limit the new Proposition 50 congressional redrawn maps for only one congressional term. The voter-approved Prop 50 has the redrawn maps in effect through 2030. The ballot initiative was introduced one day after voters passed the proposition. The initiative called for the Fair, Independent, and Nonpartisan Redistricting Act will appear on the November 2026 ballot if enough signatures are collected. We have updates tonight on the legislature's efforts to tackle affordable housing. Assembly Bill 1157, also known as the Affordable Rent Act or the Rent Cap Bill, will not be moving forward. Here are some of the details. It failed to pass just this afternoon in the Assembly Judiciary Committee for the second year in a row. Democratic Assembly member Ash Kalra, who is the author of the bill, introduced it last year and had brought it back for reconsideration. Speaker after speaker from both sides took to the podium during the hearing. This preceded by a rally on Monday, which advocates voiced strong support for the bill. AB 1157 proposed establishing a permanent rent cap statewide, reducing it from the current 10% to 5%, and expanding protections to single-family homes. Congressman Kevin Kiley is sharing an update on his re-election plans. Well, kind of an update. Kiley currently represents District 3, which has been broken up into 6 renumbered districts after the passing of Proposition 50. Kiley says that he is still making a decision, but he will not run in District 4. That means he will no longer represent portions of Placer and Yuba County. California is once again taking a stand against the Trump administration over federal immigration enforcement. San Francisco Senator Scott Wiener is pushing a bill that would allow Californians to sue federal officials. ABC 10 State Matters political reporter Jenny Hubb breaks down the legal implications.
We're here today because ICE and the Trump administration is trampling over the Constitution and needs to be held accountable.
That's why Senate Bill 747 is called the No Kings Act, says lead author Senator Scott Wiener.
If California can't stand up to Trump, then who can? And so California has a solemn responsibility to lead.
He says the legislation is to hold federal officials and agents more accountable in light of recent headlines regarding operations by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and U.S. Customs and Border Patrol.
We are not breaking radical new legal ground here. We are closing a loophole.
A legal loophole in Section 1983, supporters say, which is a federal civil rights law that lets citizens sue local or state officers for constitutional violations, but not federal officers.
If this were state or local officials, we would be in court right now. But because federal officials are excluded from Section 1983, something that this bill tries to remedy, we basically have many fewer options.
Anya Bidwell is with the Institute for Justice, the group representing George Redis, a U.S. citizen and veteran who was detained for 72 hours by ICE last July on his way to work.
They still trapped me in my car with tear gas. They still broke my window. They still pepper sprayed me. They still dragged me out of the car even though I wasn't resisting or anything.
Bidwell says Redis has not yet filed a complaint, as it would likely be dismissed under discretionary immunity under current law.
So I was free to go, and I just got to live with the experience that they put me through.
The reason ICE behaves in the way they do is because they know that it is extremely difficult to sue them.
Supporters say the easiest remedy would be for Congress to amend existing law, but until then, it's up to states.
You're saying states have no right to regulate federal authorities.
Correct. We cannot have 50 different states deciding how they think we should be operating. The states do not have the authority to regulate federal agents, period. End of story.
I believe that this is going to feed a fire of anti-law enforcement that is unjustified.
Again, this would be for cases in California, and if passed, it would be retroactive to March 1st, 2025. Now, there is a hearing tomorrow on another Senator Wiener legislation, which would ban most law enforcement officers from wearing masks while on duty. It is being challenged by the Trump administration. All right, turning to Iran now, where the death toll from nationwide protests is now at least 2,000 people. That is according to human rights activists. According to U.S. officials, President Trump met with his national security team to discuss his options for intervention in the Islamic Republic. The administration is considering new sanctions, possible cyber attacks, and even military intervention. President Trump canceled all meetings with Iranian officials and said, quote, help is on its way, as anti-government demonstrations in Iran have been going on now for about 2 weeks.
The killing of peaceful demonstrators must stop. The labeling of protesters as terrorists to justify violence against them is unacceptable.
Iran's foreign minister blames in part the U.S. for the violence without providing evidence. Trump claims Iran wants to negotiate with Washington. Still a lot more news to get to, like a major decision before the Supreme Court, the fight over transgender athletes in school sports, and what it could mean nationwide. Then California joins another lawsuit against the Trump administration, this time over possible Title IX violations.
Another cold and foggy start to tomorrow morning, but another mild afternoon with highs in the upper 50s to near 60. I've got the full forecast after the break.
But first, in other headlines tonight. Director and actor Timothy Busfield turned himself in today over child sex abuse charges in New Mexico. The charges stem from allegations that Busfield inappropriately touched a young boy on the set of the TV show The Cleaning Lady that he directed and acted in. Busfield denies the allegations. He has connections to Sacramento, where he was a co-founder of the B Street Theater. In a statement to ABC 10, the theater said he hasn't served in any capacity since 2001. Former President Bill Clinton did not attend a hearing this morning about sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The Republican chair of the House Oversight Committee says the former president could be in contempt of Congress. That can carry charges. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton had a similar deposition scheduled for tomorrow. Her attorneys say that she won't show up either. The Clintons' lawyers call the subpoenas from the committee invalid and say they're legally unenforceable. And cancer survival rates are on the rise. That's according to a new report by the American Cancer Society, which shows 7 in 10 people in the U.S. are now reaching the 5-year milestone after a cancer diagnosis. The report credits fewer people smoking, earlier detection, and advances in treatment. All right, time for a check of your forecast. Now let's get things over to meteorologist Brendan Minchef. Felt a little bit warmer, still sunny. Are temperatures kind of, upticking?
Yeah, a little bit. We did hit some temperatures that were above normal for the time of year. In fact, we made it into the 60s across much of the valley. 62 in Sacramento, 63 Stockton, 62 in Modesto, 61 in Jackson, 45 in Truckee, 50 in South Lake Tahoe. Our normal high is 55 degrees, and you can see there we're running about 7 degrees warmer than normal across the valley. Temperatures now in the low 50s across much of the valley, 30s in the high country. Towards downtown, 52 degrees. Clear skies for now, but that lack of wind will allow for some fog to return tonight. Temperatures will be falling through the 40s and we'll start off in the 30s tomorrow morning, again with some fog. You see it returning as we head through the overnight and into the morning hours. We did end up getting a dense fog advisory early this morning. We may get another one for tomorrow morning as some of that dense fog is possible again. And temperatures in the upper 30s, 38 in Sacramento, about 40 in Stockton, though 41 in Modesto, 51 Placerville, 15 in Truckee, 20 in South Lake Tahoe. Chilly and foggy. Foggy, then sunny as we head through Wednesday afternoon. Temperatures in the upper 50s across most of the valley. I also want to point this out. Our normal high tomorrow's 56 degrees. That is the first time since July that our average high temperature is increasing. So for the last 27 days, we've had a normal high temperature of 55 degrees. Tomorrow goes up to 56 degrees. By the end of January, our normal high is 58. By the end of February, our normal high temperature in Sacramento is 64 degrees. So it's all uphill from here. 55 degrees is the coldest we get in terms of our daily normal high temperature. The hottest, 93 degrees. We get there in early July and stay there through early August. So it'll be a while before we see the 90s, but it may also be another week or so before we start to see some rain or snow chances returning as high pressure builds all the way up off the coast of British Columbia. It's not until later next week that high pressure finally breaks, and we could be talking about some rain chances by the time we get towards next Thursday or Friday. In the meantime, though, consistent temperatures, morning frost, and fog. Alex?
Right after the break, the Supreme Court hears arguments in a case that could reshape school sports for millions of students. And it's not just for immigrants anymore. Why more Americans than ever are seeking dual citizenship. Welcome back in. The Supreme Court heard arguments today in 2 blockbuster cases challenging transgender sports bans. The issue is whether state bans are permitted under federal law. Michael Yoshida reports for us tonight.
Our nation's highest court hearing arguments on transgender athlete participation bans. The issue before the Supreme Court after a college student in Idaho and a high schooler in West Virginia challenged laws in their states that restricted transgender students from playing on sports teams that are consistent with their gender identities.
So how do you square our various case law, all of whom involved a subclass of people who challenged on equal protection grounds their exclusion from a definition?
At the heart of both cases, whether the state bans violate equal protections of the 14th Amendment and Title IX, which bans discrimination in education on the basis of sex.
Idaho's law classifies on the basis of sex because sex is what matters in sports. It correlates strongly with countless athletic advantages. If women don't have their own competitions, they won't be able to compete. Gender identity does not matter in sports.
The states argue their bans are about creating an even playing field. The challengers say they're being discriminated towards on the basis of sex and transgender status.
By categorically excluding all students with the biological sex of male from women's teams. Sex classifications like that are closely scrutinized under the Equal Protection Clause to ensure they rest on evidence, not supposition.
Across the country, 27 states have enacted restrictions on transgender students' participation in sports. A ruling from the Supreme Court on the Idaho and West Virginia laws is expected by the end of June. In Washington, Michael Yoshida.
State Attorney General Rob Bonta is leading a multi-state lawsuit against the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. This is over new grant rules that critics say target transgender and gender nonconforming people. The lawsuit argues the new conditions unlawfully force grant recipients to comply with the order, exceed the department's authority, and violate federal law and constitution. Attorney General Rob Bonta and 11 other states say the policy undermines Title IX and puts vital programs at risk. The coalition is asking a federal judge to block the rules before they take effect coming up later this year. The Department of Homeland Security says that it is ending a form of humanitarian relief for Somali nationals living in the United States known as Temporary Protected Status, or TPS. It applies to people who would face extreme hardship if forced to return to homelands devastated by armed conflict or even natural disasters. Somali citizens were first granted TPS back in 1991 and maintained it due to insecurity and ongoing armed conflict. TPS for Somalis is set to expire on March 17th. The Trump administration argues conditions in their home country no longer justify those protections. 3 top prosecutors in Minnesota resigned. Joseph Thompson served as the acting U.S. attorney for Minnesota and the state's first assistant U.S. attorney. Harry Jacobs and Melinda Williams, both career prosecutors, also resigned. A source close to the matter say that the resignations come after pressure from the Trump administration on how to handle the case of Renee Good, who was killed by an ICE agent in Minneapolis last week. Traveling from country to country without any restrictions, shorter lines at the border, or maybe even reconnecting with family roots. All that and more is the dream of those who seek dual citizenship. In the last several years, Americans are among the top globally of people searching for a second passport. For as long as migration has existed, many immigrants who want to naturalize in a new country have wanted to retain their citizenship of origin. In recent decades, the wealthy have also embraced dual citizenship as a way to expand global mobility.
What we've seen over the last probably 4 or 5 years especially is a significant increase in demand from more developed nations. So the US is the clear sort of leader in that regard.
Dominic Volek is group head of private clients for Henley and Partners, which assists high net worth individuals in attending dual citizenship around the globe. Last year, they assisted clients of 91 nationalities, but Americans were top of the list. A November Gallup poll found that 1 in 5 Americans would like to immigrate, including 40% of women aged 15 to 44, a 400% increase on a similar poll taken in 2014.
We had a few interesting political cycles, and so both sides of the political spectrum had concerns on the other and vice versa, and so they were looking to build in that optionality.
Professor Peter Spiro with Temple University says, in a way, gaining dual citizenship can serve as an insurance policy.
Even if you're never going to use it, just knowing that you've got that other passport in the drawer results in a kind of peace of mind.
And other than application fees, experts say there's little downside to obtaining dual citizenship, especially if it's through descent.
Most countries, there are very few obligations of citizenship that apply if you're living outside of the country.
Stay with us after the break. Our ABC 10 investigation, a critical moment from Highlands Charter School. Happening tonight, Highlands Community Charter and Technical Schools will return to the Twin Rivers Unified School District meeting, presenting updates in effort to keep their charter designation. Highlands has been at the center of an ABC 10 investigation, and Twin Rivers Unified School District took formal steps back in November to potentially revoke its charter after a 2024 state audit exposed major issues. The audit found uncredentialed teachers, altered attendance records, and financial mismanagement totaling to millions, with the state demanding over $180 million back. District leaders say Highlands must fix the problems and show full compliance before its charter can be preserved. Tonight, Highlands leaders are expected to present the steps that they are taking to address these issues, and Twin Rivers board members could vote on approving those revisions. ABC 10 will be at the meeting and will, of course, bring you the latest information tonight. You can also watch the Wild West of Education, our investigation into Highlands Charter School, on the ABC 10 TV app. That is streaming right now if you do want to check it out. As always, thank you so much for watching, for always inviting us into your home. If you have something you think me and the team should be looking into, you can always reach out to us. You've already had a couple people this week reach out to us. We will get back to your emails, but thank you so much for trusting our team to tell your stories. And don't forget, you can catch up on any shows or stories that you missed by downloading our free app. And don't forget, To the Point does not end here. You can also find us on our digital platform as well. Have a great night. I'll see you later.